We would like to acknowledge that we are gathering on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. Recognizing this history is important to our future and our efforts to close the gap in health outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. Throughout this presentation, the terms mother and breastfeeding will be used. We encourage all healthcare providers to inquire with families on first consultation what language they use when referring to their pregnancy, parenting, and infant feeding, as well as their preferred pronouns. Well, the world being in a pandemic has made us rethink the way we do everything and has challenged our concept of normal. It's never been more important to prioritize support for birthing families, to streamline communications and continuity of care, and to facilitate informed decision-making and autonomy of care. Let's take this time to look at what being baby-friendly means and why it's important to continue to strive for these standards now, and a few areas where we can make small practice changes that will have big impact on the care we provide. So what's the Baby-Friendly Initiative all about? In 1991, the World Health Organization and UNICEF launched the initiative to help motivate facilities providing maternity and newborn services worldwide to provide timely and appropriate care to enable the establishment of optimal feeding of newborns. Breastfeeding is protected, promoted, and supported, but in 2009, guidelines were added for safe formula feeding and for care of those with HIV. In 2018, an extensive literature review resulted in more updates and the addition of guidelines for small, sick, and preterm babies. In 2019, the BFI was formally threaded through Accreditation Canada standards. As at present, it remains the best model for maternity policy with proven efficacy. But why was it necessary to formalize minimum standards of maternity care, including infant feeding, in the first place? One would hope that that would be a given. Well, in the 80s, formula was recognized as safe, simple, and universally successful. Physicians were asking the question, is breastfeeding even worth the bother? Formula companies had inundated hospitals, and they used healthcare professionals, you and I, as their most powerful marketing agents. Company agents, dressed as nurses, went door to door at that time and right into the hospital, and their sales pitch was, "We know breast is best, but after you've tried that." And in exchange for handing out discharge packs of formula, hospitals received freebies, like formula, gifts for employees, doctors received free trips, there was funding for education rooms and entire facilities. And for every dollar spent, every gift pack handed out, formula companies received hundreds of dollars in return. At the same time, companies were being accused of getting third-world mothers hooked on formula by giving free samples. Babies died if they weren't getting their mother's milk. There was a global boycott, Senate trials, and companies like Nestle were sued. So the World Health Organization commissioned a task force. It made 3 important conclusions which hold true to this day, even in industrialized countries. Breastfeeding is a unique process. It provides optimal nutrition and contributes to healthy growth and development, with the most benefit seen with 6 months of exclusive breast milk. It reduces the incidence and severity of infectious diseases, thereby lowering infant morbidity and mortality, and it reduces the risk of breast and ovarian cancer for those who are breastfeeding. To help maternity facilities with this work, the WHO laid out a blueprint, the 10 steps to baby-friendly. Are the steps still relevant? Absolutely. Quality improvement work is ongoing. Infant feeding guidelines have been updated internationally, and ours are ready for review. We know that skin-to-skin is optimal, regardless of mode of birth or method of feeding, but how to engage our partners to do it safely? Parents have shared that they want consistent information between maternal care, NICU, and Healthy and Home. How can we make this happen? An important component of the 10 steps is the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes, signed at the World Health Assembly by most member countries except the United States, to stop the aggressive and inappropriate marketing of formula. Formula companies, now globally valued at some $55 billion, are controlled by 6 of the most powerful food companies in the world. They pay social media platforms and influencers to target new parents with personalized social media content that's often not recognizable as advertising. This marketing is built on deception. By law, all products must have the same formulation as established by independent research. Check out this 2022 report to see the techniques companies are using to influence vulnerable families. The importance of human milk and the risks of not receiving it continue to be demonstrated. We owe much of this knowledge from studies with preterm babies. Human milk benefits infants in several areas: host defense, gastrointestinal development, and neurodevelopmental outcomes. When the sterile newborn gut is introduced to formula first, it interrupts the normal gut flora, whose role it is to protect baby against bacterial and viral infections. One of the most severe preterm morbidities is necrotizing enterocolitis. It's thought that human milk reduces the incidence and severity of NEC through its bactericidal, immunologic, antioxidant, and anti-inflammatory properties. That's why pasteurized donor milk is used in our NICU for the very small, sick, and preterm. In fact, in Moose Jaw, all families have the option to use human milk on the maternal unit if they don't have access to mother's own milk. Even the dose and timing of mom's own milk is important. This study showed that small increases in human milk in the NICU during the first 14 days of life reduced the number of hospitalizations at 1 year. This study found that breast milk of mothers infected with COVID-19 had no viral RNA, but antibodies were present in 83%, especially IgA. This slide shows the human milk oligosaccharides and IgAs, which possess anti-infective properties against pathogens in the sterile infant GI tract, such as GBS, Salmonella, and Listeria. They are essentially not digested by the infant, rather are food for good bacteria, such as Bifidobacter. It is these properties, the living cells and antibodies, which formulations have not been able to replicate. This slide shows the human milk oligosaccharides and IgAs, which possess anti-infective properties against pathogens in the sterile infant gut, like GBS and Salmonella. Essentially, they're not digested by the infant. They act like prebiotics. They're like decoys for pathogens. They're food for good bacteria. It's these properties, the living cells and antibodies, which no formulations have been able to replicate. So safety is really the backbone of the Baby Friendly. We need to ensure that each one of you feels safe and that parents feel safe. Policies and procedures need to be grounded in evidence, from the transition from intrauterine to extrauterine life to discharge. If baby is breastfeeding, do we feel confident to assess a feed? Families have shared that they want a detailed assessment of the feeding prior to discharge, and not just to be asked, is it going okay? They see us as the experts. They don't know how to answer that question, and they're asking for sustained and respectful help. They want to know what to watch for should problems arise. Breastfeeding without assessment leads to sore nipples, uncertainty about milk transfer, jaundice, weight loss, readmission, and upset parents. And the same goes for our formula feeding families. Babies must still be assessed for their tolerance and coping. Families need one-on-one discussion. They need to know how to safely prepare, handle, feed, and store formula. So how to bring this evidence base to practice? We can start with 3 simple steps: keeping families together as much as possible, supporting parents as partners in care, and facilitating informed decisions, and teaching responsive cue-based feeding when appropriate for both the breast and bottle-fed baby. Let's look at this video. It shows that breastfeeding happens, and it shows so clearly baby's instincts to self-attach.
This will help to expel placenta and reduce bleeding. Once baby realizes that food is in close proximity, it starts salivating. Smell is a strong stimulus which drives the baby towards the nipple. Baby's smell sensation is well developed. Smell of a chemical on nipples is similar to the smell of a chemical in amniotic fluid, which surrounds the baby in the womb. Mouthing movements start. Her shoulder, hip, and neck muscles are sufficiently developed to help her move. Baby with her limited vision can see the areola. If baby raises her head, it can also see mother's face. Baby has reached the nipple, has raised her head, and has nicely lashed it with wide open mouth and mouthful of breast.
So babies have instincts to seek out and attach to the breast. They use their sense of smell, arms and legs. They rest, and they start over. We tend to take them away, and we tend to take their hands away too, but the hands are like feelers, shaping the breast, stimulating the nipples to evert. As with all other mammals, human infant feeding represents the end of the reproductive cycle, the final stage of the birth process. It's the fourth stage of labor. What we're asking the primary birth nurse to do is just keep baby in her natural habitat if the diet is stable, regardless of mode of delivery or feeding method. These 9 instincts to seek out the breast have been identified. So when historically our charting has seemed to imply that babies need to nurse well or latch with audible swallows immediately after birth, maybe we can move to a more flexible approach. Offered the breast within the first hour, expressed drops of colostrum and fed to baby. Can we look at transferring baby and skin to skin on mom if partner is present to support and mom is feeling well and awake? What can we do to minimize disturbing the dyad following birth? This small intervention will have big impact, regardless of method of feeding. This will help build relationships. This multi-center study showed that increasing skin-to-skin contact increased rates of breastfeeding by 28%, and this in babies less than 1,600 grams. Teaching safe skin-to-skin is of course a priority. This pic from Sunnybrook Hospital shows the technique. Head to one side, open airway, wide open body. We watch for change in color, tone, breathing, and free movement of the head and chest. We involve the support person, if there is one, to hold the naked thigh. Stability of the mum and baby, absence of apnea, desaturation, and bradycardia are assessed.
So now I'm going to have you, we're going to together listen to this special cry that the baby have. You will see it's in operating room. The baby is on a warming table, and it's being measured. I know you don't do that anymore probably, but anyway, that's a good example. And then listen to it, and then we'll see after. I'm just going to play this now, like this way.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, So did you think the baby was happy there? And I can't tell you, I have heard this cry for decades behind me while I was doing cesarean section. We did not know. Now I can't stand it. It cannot be done anymore. Because you see, we don't know if this baby is not already in survival mode. You don't know. Remember my study about the Americans, you know, they're 64% are probably in survival mode. And then what you do, and you send it even more into survival because this baby is totally scared that he's going to be eaten up by an eagle or something like this. This is genetically encoded. And guess what? We used to say, um, oh, this is good breathing. They have good lungs. I don't know if you heard, but that's what she said. And you could hear the nurse counting the sponges at the back. But it's not, you know, we should not do this. And you see, if you say, oh, send the baby to the nursery because then it's gonna be quiet. What happened to the baby? And this is another reflex I want to stress. After the cry, the distress cry, there will be silence. And the mammalian, that's what they do. If you take the little mouse and you take her away, first she's gonna cry. Then eventually, when nobody picks her up, she's gonna duck down into silence because if she keeps crying, the eagle will come. Okay? So if you think the babies are fine at the nursery in their cot, just silent, they probably have a cortisol up in the roof, you know, because they're just now, I'm going to shut up.
Supporting extended skin-to-skin care and keeping families together. So this is for afterbirth, as supportive for all families, for recognizing infant cues regardless of how babies are fed, for establishing loving relationships between parents and their infants, and very importantly, for decreasing stress. In this clip from Dr. Guy-Paul Gagné, Director of MOROB in Quebec, he's finishing a lecture on the epidemic of stress we've seen in women and its effects on child development. He's explaining research from the field of epigenetics to support why mother and newborn should never be disturbed. For those working in NICU, a key component of the baby-friendly is enabling families to have frequent and prolonged skin-to-skin contact with baby as soon as possible after birth and throughout the baby's stay on the neonatal unit. In this clip from Dr. Guy-Paul Gagné, Director of MOROB in Quebec, he's finishing a lecture on the epidemic of stress we've seen in prenatal and new parents and its effects on child development. He's explaining research from the field of epigenetics to support why the birthing dyad should not be disturbed when possible. So from a neurodevelopmental perspective, when we remove babies from their mothers unnecessarily, we're actually sending cortisol levels sky high, because newborns have very limited self-regulatory skills after birth, and they depend on the sensitive behavior of their parents, specifically the birth parent, to regulate affective states and psychological arousal. We know this from the work of Dr. Niels Bergman with preterm babies as well. It's not just cortisol. Babies removed from their primary caregivers also have increased endogenous opiate levels. Endorphins are affected, oxytocin and prolactin, important hormones to establish bonding, trust, and any type of feeding. So actively encouraging and enabling families to provide touch, comfort, and emotional support to baby is so important. A second key component of the baby-friendly for neonatal families is valuing parents as partners in care. How do we do this? By ensuring that parents have unrestricted access to their baby, unless individual restrictions can be justified in the baby's best interest. By ensuring that parents are fully involved in baby's care, that they are listened to, including their observations, feelings, and wishes regarding baby's care, that they have full information regarding baby's condition and treatment to enable informed decision-making, and that they are made comfortable while on the unit, with the aim of enabling them to spend as much time as possible with their baby. Mothers have shared this past year that they want to allow their babies to suckle at the breast. The literature does support that non-nutritive breastfeeding can be used before alternate oral feeding methods are introduced. Could this be a small practice change that would have big impact on the care we provide for our families? Establishing a full milk supply is challenging for mothers of small, sick, and/or preterm babies. Therefore, moms should be offered appropriate assistance with milk expression within 1 to 3 hours after birth, or as soon as possible if the mom's unstable. Mothers should be encouraged to breastfeed or express milk at least 7 to 8 times or more every 24 hours, including at least once at night, to establish and maintain their milk supply, as much as they are able and willing. Mothers who are not able, for example due to mastectomy or breast reduction, or have decided not to breastfeed, should also be fully informed of feeding options, including donor human milk if available, and risks of alternative feeding choices, as even partial feeding of human milk, especially for the first few weeks of life, is important for small, sick, and preterm infants. With appropriate information, some mothers may choose to provide their colostrum or their own milk for some period of time. The mother who will be formula feeding should receive written instructions and be individually taught how to safely prepare, store, handle, and feed formula prior to infant discharge. So parents need evidence-based information that supports the transition to breastfeeding if that's been their decision. And there's a shift now in the literature from all timed feeding, volumes and amounts, toward responsive cue-based feeding, not for the high-risk baby who's not cueing to feed, but for babies who are ready. This gives infants a voice and is beneficial for brain growth and parent engagement. So babies don't demand, rather we teach parents to respond. We teach engagement cues, stress cues, and disengagement cues for feeding. So mothers need the opportunity to discuss this aspect of feeding, and we reassure moms that breastfeeding can be used to feed, comfort, and calm babies. And the same goes for our formula feeding families. They also need reassurance that it may not be necessary to feed exact amounts, rather to feed their baby to satiate and to tolerance, and again to watch those cues for stress, engagement, and disengagement. Now that would be different if the baby is at high risk and they're being followed closely. Loving Mummy. Okay, Silas. Dad, you get on in there. You can come in and maybe give Mum's breast. You can just massage it a little bit. Help, yeah, help with the oxytocin. Yes, look how baby's responding. His eyes are opening up. Oh, yeah, Daddy's there. Mommy and Daddy love you so much. They do. So babies use their hands like feelers to feel where they are. Yes, they don't use their eyes to find the nipple. They use their sense of smell. They lick and they taste. They bob their head and they seek out the breast. Yes. So it's like physiotherapy, this position almost, as they search for the breast. Excellent. Good baby. Good Levi. Yes. Now you might be worried about his nose and his breathing. But once he finds the breast, he's going to adjust himself so that he can breathe and suck. Okay? Good morning. We are. Thank you. Yep. Okay. Good, Daddy. Now, I'm going to show you, you can compress a little bit harder here because Mom has some nice hard milk ducts right here. And we're going to reward Levi by squeezing the milk in deeply. So when Levi sucks, we're going to squeeze. Mommy, am I hurting you? You can say. No. You can even just use the palm of the hand to squeeze. Come on, Levi. And he's just figuring out where he is and getting started, so we're not expecting too much yet. Okay, Daddy, so you can take over here. Just feeling, you can feel some lumps and bumps. I threw this slide in just to show the usefulness of laid back, more biological nursing positions. This baby had been to NICU and then had returned to the maternal care unit, so had received bottle feeds, and the success here was just watching baby's instincts to latch at the breast. Just a quick pic to show latch at the breast. We see ear in line with shoulder, shoulder is in line with hip, tummy to mummy, chin is nuzzled in, nose is free, more of the bottom of the areola than the top, and never having a hand on baby's head. Often babies have bruised heads and they can't even stand a finger touch on their head. This video shows good swallowing at the breast, and I think that's one of the best gifts we can give to families, is helping them to identify what a swallow looks like or sounds like. They may not see, they likely won't see good swallowing at the breast before they go home, but giving them that anticipatory guidance to know what to expect, and what to expect as far as pees and poops and signs and symptoms to return to the hospital should there be any concerns. There's the swallow. We know she's swallowing when she has that little pause of the jaw. There. 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 There, 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 there. So these are the basics: involving parents as partners in care, supporting safe skin-to-skin and loving relationships, supporting early breast stimulation, early and often, supporting breastfeeding or expression at least 8 or more in 24, watching a feed, and teaching what to watch for once families go home. Well, we want to be recognized as a baby-friendly designated teaching hospital, and we can do that by working together with small working teams across units to change our culture and starting on small practice changes that will have big impact. As my friend Nada would say, BFI is about bringing babies into the world as safely and as gently as possible. That means we recognize that parents are the ultimate caretakers of their infants, with the right to participate in all decisions about their babies, including how they will feed them. It means that everything we do and say matters. Perinatal practices affect mode of birth, affect feeding, affect bonding and attachment, affect stress, affect maternal and child long-term health outcomes. Thanks for sharing this time with me, and for all those who brought forward your ideas to improve and your care experiences, particularly around your own infant feeding and birthing stories. Thank you so much. Those stories are the most important thing. Our ask now is that we use the stories to help us reflect and guide practice improvement. Let's keep talking, sharing, as we write policies, learn, and grow. Health systems change is easy, said no one. But one small practice change can have a big impact.